Happening now, NYPD Commissioner James O'Neill and New York City Mayor de Blasio holding a press conference updating us on crime statistics for the city. It's happening right now live in East Flatbush.
Let's listen in. Another truly remarkable year citywide in 2018 in terms of how the NYPD and all the people we serve gauge our city's safety. It's as much about reducing violence and disorder and actually making people safe as it is about ensuring people feel safe. And by precisely focusing our resources on the areas and the people responsible for driving that violence and crime and disorder, we've been able to earn dramatic drops for yet another year. And when I say we, I mean all New Yorkers, the men and women of the NYPD, the FBI, the Secret Service, State Police, the ATF, the U.S. Marshals, none of them happen to be getting paid right now. Our great partners, the New York State Police, our other local, state, and federal colleagues, like our prosecutors and the U.S. attorneys, with whom we work so closely to build solid cases and to send away criminals with meaningful, appropriate prison sentences. You heard me say that if we want to keep seeing solid crime reductions year after year, we'll take all 8.6 million New Yorkers who live in our great city, plus the millions more who work and visit here annually, too. Every day, members of the NYPD are making those connections. They're building trust and strengthening relationships in every neighborhood around the city. And our continued collective success will be sustained by even greater cooperation. In 2018, many of the indicators of a safe society, like reductions in bellwether crimes such as burglaries, robberies, and shootings, all saw dramatic drops over the previous year, which is extraordinary given the historic lows we already achieved. We've just logged the fewest number of murders in New York City in nearly 70 years. Our homicide rate has plunged to a level that was simply unthinkable just a generation ago. The men and women who put on these police uniforms every day know better, and it's their skill and dedication that gets it done. It's keeping New York City safe, and by far it's the safest large city in America. We know that 2019 promises to be a year of great opportunity, another chapter in our city's history that will see even more NYPD successes realized on behalf of all New Yorkers. There'll be some times of adversity, because that's the nature of policing. There will also be moments of great triumph through crimes and arrests prevented, many lives saved, families kept intact, and the quality of life vastly improved. I want to commend all of our NYPD members and all of the New Yorkers who steadfastly support our neighborhood policing philosophy, which is taking us to even greater, higher heights together. Unified as one New York City, they're the reason we continue to be a model, the standard, in fact, for the rest of the country and the world. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Happy New Year, everyone. Happy New Year to all the members of the NYPD who are here. Commissioner, congratulations. I want to express my gratitude, and all the people of New York City owe the NYPD a real debt of gratitude for the achievements that were undertaken in 2018. It's unbelievable what has happened here, and congratulations to First Deputy Commissioner Tucker, to Chief of Department Monahan, all the leadership here. Special thanks to our host, Inspector Elliot Colon, commanding officer of the 6-7 precinct, and congratulations to all the men and women of the 6-7 precinct. They've done some great work in 2018. We'll talk about that in a moment. Thank you as well to our partners in this work, the elected officials who represent this community, Assemblymember Rodneyce Bichotte and Councilmember Matthew Eugene. Thank you for your great work, all of us together in 2018. Look, I want to put this in perspective. We had in 2017 a record-setting year. We had crime down in ways that no one believed possible previously. And in 2018, the NYPD beat the record again. In 2018, the NYPD set a new record, the lowest level of crime that we have seen since the 1950s in this city. And very, very importantly, 2 years in a row under 300 homicides. You know, for anyone who has looked carefully at this over the years, for many years in this city, good people, smart people, close observers thought there was no way in the world that a city of 8.6 million people could possibly get below 300 homicides in a year. When it happened in 2017, there are a lot of people who said it must be an aberration, it must be a one-time deal. NYPD has made very clear by their actions that we're in a new normal now, and we intend to go farther. less than one homicide a day in this city, and we intend to go farther. So it's extraordinary what's been achieved. Overall crime down 1.3% since 2017. You're going to hear from Chief Pollack on the numbers in a moment. But when you look in the context of just recent years, and I want to give you the comparison to 5 years ago in 2013, murders are down 14% since 2013, just 5 years' time. 14% reduction in murders. When you go back to 1990, which very sadly was the high watermark time of when crime was at its worst, murders are down 87% since 1990. When you now look at the 2018 numbers, it's unbelievable. And that means thousands of New Yorkers who lived and families that remained whole. We always have to take these numbers and then look at the human reality. People walking the streets today alive who wouldn't be otherwise. It's unbelievable to think how far we've come, but it has taken an immense amount of very systematic work, very hard work by the NYPD and so many community partners to get to this point. And the 6-7 precinct is a great example of that. Again, if you take that comparison to 1990, 6-7 precinct's gone even farther. Compared to 1990, murders down 89% in the 6-7 precinct. So that's something everyone should be very, very proud of. We're the safest big city in America. We prove it year after year after year. And this is now a pattern that's going to stick and that's going to get even better. And we've said very clearly we have to be the fairest big city in America, and the NYPD is leading the way. These facts are astounding to me. Stop and frisk down 94% since 2013, and crime has continued to go down year after year after year. Overall arrests down 37% since 2013. I want to repeat that. Overall arrests down 37% since 2013, crime down consistently, and addressing the crisis of mass incarceration at the same time. You don't have a mass incarceration you don't have a mass incarceration crisis if people are not being unnecessarily arrested. It's one of the keys to righting that wrong, and the NYPD is leading the way. The new marijuana policy has led to an 81% decline in marijuana-related arrests. These were conscious actions based on strategy, based on ideas like precision policing that made a huge difference. Obviously, neighborhood policing now fully rolled out in every precinct and making a huge difference. We simply can put it this way. Members of the NYPD are getting information and support from communities like they have never seen in generations. It's making a huge difference. One of the things that they've most needed was that kind of support, that kind of information, knowing about things before they happen, getting the kind of tips that will make a difference. That's what our officers are getting now, and it's one of the keys to continuing this reduction in crime. So that's all extraordinarily good news. And there's one other piece of news that couldn't possibly be better. Thank God we lost no officers in the line of duty this year. And thank God for that, and thank God for the work that our officers do. We want them to be safe. It's our obligation to make sure they're safe. And at every graduation, I tell the families of our new officers, we're adding the things that will make sure they're safe more and more all the time. Better equipment, better training, the kinds of approaches that will protect our officers. 2018, a very good year. So the bottom line is it's working, and now we intend to go farther. And it's working because the NYPD is hand in hand with neighborhood residents, making neighborhoods safer. And this is a great example right here in the 6-7 precinct in Brooklyn. Just a few words in Spanish. Me da gran orgullo anunciar esto. La ciudad de Nueva York batió su propio récord de seguridad el año pasado. Nuestros valientes policías han transformado nuestra ciudad. Gracias a sus logros, nuestros vecindarios son tranquilos y nuestras calles alegres. Congratulations to all. Now I'll turn to Chief Lori Pollack, our Chief of Crime Control Strategies, to go over the numbers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year.
So what does New York City look like going into 2019? It looks like the safest big city in the country. In a city of over 8.6 million people, we went 5 days or more without a recorded murder, 5 different times in 2018, including a streak of 9 consecutive days, November 25th through December 3rd, without a murder for only the 3rd time in the Comstat era. Our murder rate is 3.31 per 100,000 persons, the lowest per capita murder rate for New York City in over 50 years, down almost 2 murders per 100,000 from 2012, when it was a little over 5 per 100,000. We are at record lows for murder, shootings, robbery, burglary, GLA, and total index crime. Overall crime is at a new record low. The first time in the Comstat era we have recorded below 96,000 index crime. That's a reduction of 1.3%. Brooklyn South, where we are now, has seen a 5% reduction in index crime this year, and the 6-7 precinct is down 10% in index crime in 2018. Although overall index crime is down, we have seen an increase in domestic index crime through most of the city. 3 of the 5 boroughs have seen an increase in domestic violence, with only Patrol Borough Staten Island showing a decrease. Brooklyn South is relatively flat, but the 6-7 precinct saw a 5.8 reduction in domestic violence index crime. Murders. December continued our downward trend, and we recorded for the first time 3 straight months below 20 murders, October, November, and December. Citywide, our murders are at a record low, 289 versus 292. In 2018, 17% of our murders were domestic. 49 versus 45 domestic murders, an increase of 4. 70% of those murders had no prior history, and 3 incidents involved multiple victims. Of these 49 murders, 19 victims were shot in 14 incidents. Domestic-related fatal shooting victims were up 19 versus 5, and the murder shooting incidents were 14 versus 5. We have removed over 65 guns from households when given the opportunity during domestic violence calls, home visits, and through other human intelligence. And overall shootings were responsible for over 55% of our murders. This underscores the importance placed by the NYPD on each and every firearm we come in contact with, when we strive to treat each gun arrest or recovery as its own crime scene. We work very closely with the appropriate prosecutorial venue to ensure that we provide the very best case possible to maximize the leverage a prosecutor may use to ensure a successful prosecution. Overall, our gang-related murders are 92 versus 90. This translates into 32% of New York City's murders involving a gang member. Persons under supervised release, parolees and probationers, are involved in over 19% of our murder incidents in 2018, and these are the sharks, not the minnows. We talked about murders in the Bronx in the first half of the year. 53 versus 30, that was an increase of 23. Adjustments were made by the borough commander, and the second half of 2018, the Bronx recorded 37 murders versus 42, a decrease of 5 over the second half of 2017. They did show, for the year, an increase of 18, 90 versus 72, and the most notable increase was in domestic violence murders in the Bronx, 20 versus 11. Queens North showed a marked increase in murders in the second half of the year, 25 versus 13, an increase of 12 murders, and those 25 murders were driven primarily by the 114 precinct, 10 versus 3. The 114 experienced 2 unrelated domestic murder incidents, resulting in a total of 4 victims. The 109 also showed an increase of 6 versus 1. Shootings. We continued our downward trend with shootings and a new record low. Shootings were down 3.4% in December, 58 versus 67, a decrease of 9. 64 was the previous low in December of 2016. This is the 9th straight quarter with record low shootings, the longest streak since 1998. Our 2018 shooting total was down 4.4%, down 35 shootings, 754 versus 789, and 789 was the previous low in 2017. Housing shootings overall are down 8%. or 13 incidents, 143 versus 156. The Bronx housing shootings were down 15, 30 versus 45 in 2018. And gang-related shootings in housing were down citywide, 81 versus 94. Overall, our gang-related shootings were down 40, 359 versus 399. This does translate into 48% of New York City shooting incidents involving a gang member, and Brooklyn North led the shootings with a 16% increase, up 27 shootings, 195 versus 168. And these shootings are driven by gang-related violence, 116 versus 93, plus 23, or a 25% increase. Brooklyn North accounted for almost a third of all gang-related shootings citywide. Brooklyn South is down in gang-related shootings, 64 versus 74, and the 6-7 precinct saw a reduction in gang-related incidents, down 8. That propelled them to their lowest shooting number ever in the CompStat era, 39 versus 46, a reduction of 7 shootings. Talk about rape. Rape increased 328 crimes, or 22.4% in 2018. In 2018, 27% of rape reports occurred in years prior to 2018 versus the 20% we saw in 2017. We talk about this often. The current trends would not fully be understood until we are well into 2017. Transit sex crimes are down 15%. There's some good news there. They're down 156 crimes. Felony assaults, we saw a minimal percentage increase citywide. DV felony assaults did drive the slight increase. They saw an increase of 4.5%. Robbery is at a record low for the 3rd straight year. Every patrol borough won the year in robbery. The 4-7 precinct alone was down 100 robbery complaints. That's a decrease of 24%. Burglary set a new record low for the 6th straight year, finishing down 2%, or 243 crimes. And again, we're down in GLA, a new record low for the 4th straight year, finishing down 4%, or 227 crimes. There was a decrease in housing index crime, and transit was up overall crime 3.8%, and that was driven primarily by grand larcenies in Manhattan. And I'm looking forward to another successful 2019. Thank you.
All set, Laurie? Thanks. So we're going to do on-topic year-end crime stats. Ashley.
Good morning. Paula, could you repeat the number of out-of-year rapes for 2018? You gave the percentage, but I'm not sure that you gave the actual number.
Yeah, I didn't give the actual number. It just gets a little convoluted. I can give it to you at the end if you want the actual number.
Yes, I would.
Okay.
And then for the Commissioner O'Neill and Mayor Blasio, the rape statistics are probably the thing that stands out the most in the crime stats. Yet neither of you mentioned it in your opening remarks, and I'm wondering why that is.
I'll go. So this is, as you know, we meet with the sexual assault advocates every 3 months. We actually had a meeting with them a couple of weeks ago. And this is their contention, as well as our belief, is that rape is an underreported crime. And as the numbers go up, we've had our program, our public awareness program for people to come forward with sexual assault complaints. And I think that's a big part of why that numbers continue to rise. And we've done an overhaul of the Special Victims Division. Chief Shea, Chief Harrison is the CEO of that Special Victims Division now. So I left most of the numbers to Chief Pollack. She is the Chief of Crime Control Strategies, and that is her responsibility. Didn't leave it out on purpose.
I can give you, just repeat the number that you were looking for.
The raw numbers of out-of-year rapes for 2017 and 2018.
Okay, the raw numbers of the out-of-year. Okay. So the number of out-of-year complaints was 401 versus 250. So it's an increase of 151 crimes over last year's out-of-year reporting.
Thank you. And I want to direct my question to the Commissioner and to the Mayor. I mean, this is your annual press conferences where you send your big message about crime. You've come with one of the largest signs I've seen to date. And I'm just wondering why rape didn't make, it just seems strange omission that didn't make
It's not respectfully. This is a profoundly important issue, but we're dealing with a new reality that we've talked about many a time in these settings, where the advocates and the NYPD believe the same thing based on the information they have, that a historic underreporting is finally being addressed. And I think the Me Too movement is a part of it, and a number of other things are messages that are being sent by government, messages that are being sent by the media, by advocates, helping victims, survivors to know that they should come forward, that it's important that they'll be protected, they'll be supported, and that it's also important in terms of finding the perpetrators and making sure that they don't hurt someone else. This has been a very consistent pattern for quite a while now. And unlike other areas where we believe crimes have been profoundly underreported for societal reasons and bad societal reasons, this is an area where we know there has been a problem, and we think the problem is finally being addressed. So to say, look at this increase, suggesting it is a pure new phenomenon, would be a mistake from everything we know, and would be meaning that there's a new type of crime happening. What we understand is this is tragically what was happening for a long time but not being reported. It's finally being reported.
May I add something?
Please.
So from the standpoint of the NYPD, our outreach has been incredible. We have over 550 people dedicated to domestic violence in the NYPD. We're doing a top-to-bottom reorganization of the Special Victims Unit, and we've added people to that. We also have the Human Trafficking Division, which also now bolsters the reports, because there's a lot more interviewing going on, and that has a domestic and has a rape nexus in the human trafficking. We have advocates in every precinct strictly for domestic violence special victims, and then for victims of other crimes. We have an increase of 329 walk-in reports this year. To me, that's a trust issue. That means we're building trust, that people will walk into a precinct and speak to maybe the cop on the phone, maybe the desk officer, and explain to them what happened to them. The message is, we want the reports. We want to hear from you. We want to investigate these crimes. So we are dedicated to improving reporting, getting more granular with the analysis of any sex crimes, not just rapes. So.
And so is that increase of 329 from what?
So, the rapes, okay. It gets very convoluted with the numbers. Rapes increased 328%, 328 crimes, or 22% in 2018. So that's from this year. So that's the increase this year, 328 rape reports that occurred this year.
I see. I heard you say something about walk-in reports, so I just was.
So I said that now the 329 walk-in reports, I don't have that parsed out as to if those walk-in reports were from prior years or happened contemporaneously. So I don't have that breakout.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
How many of those walk-in reports amounted to a complaint?
We take a complaint on every report.
So all of those?
Yes, sometimes they'll have very vague, very minimal details. So a lot of times our reporting isn't perfect because it winds up being the address of a Special Victims Office, because that's where the conversation is taking place.
Do you know how many of them amounted to an arrest?
No, I don't have that information.
Yep.
No.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Commissioner, it's very commendable that the rates have been going down, and particularly no police officers lost their lives in 2018, and that's remarkable. My question is, with all of these statistics about crimes reported, where are the statistics about those who've been arrested and then the convictions?
We can get those numbers to you. Yep, the back row.
Yeah. Since 2013, I'm just curious, how has the rank and file numbers changed of manpower in the police force?
We had an increase of, I think, Mr. Mayor, was 2 years ago, effectively 2,000 more patrol officers. Went from a little over 34,000 to now we're a little over 36,000.
So with the decrease in crime, you've increased officers at the same time?
Yeah, we did that over 2 years ago, and it was with the firm belief that it would consolidate our progress in reducing crime, and it would also allow us to implement neighborhood policing on a citywide level. Both those things happened. And I want to thank the City Council. They were fantastic on this, and they pushed very hard for the idea of more officers on patrol. So we have 2,000 more officers on patrol than we had 2 years ago, and it has absolutely contributed to these extraordinary numbers you're hearing today, this extraordinary success. It's also allowed there to be the time and energy on the ground for neighborhood policing to work because officers have been given time to develop those deep community relationships that now are helping us drive down crime even more.
And as a follow-up, how is the contract negotiations with the PBA right now? Where are we at?
Ongoing. And that's all I can tell you, the ongoing conversations.
With the reduction in crime that, maybe it would be settled soon.
Well, we always want to settle each contract as quickly as possible. The most important facts are that with the 3 major contracts that we have settled with DC 37, UFT, and Local 237, I believe we're now in the neighborhood of almost 2/3 of our workers, of our city workers, under contract already. And we've just really begun the latest labor bargaining round. So we look forward to going further, and the door is open to all unions to speed up the process.
Tony.
For either Chief Pollack or perhaps the Commissioner or Chief Monahan, we have a rape complaint is one issue, one part of the component. How is the clearance situation for rape complaints? Where do these complaints wind up?
The clearance rate is 40% right now.
And historically, how does that figure?
It's average. It's the average over the years, 40% for the rape complaints.
Complaints that go to either an arrest and then possibly conviction or some disposition.
Yes.
Mark, hold on, Mark.
I was just wondering, is there any more breakdown as far as the number of statistics for rapes? For instance, like how many are strangers or how many are domestic incidents?
Yes. So I have it broken down, same year reporting and outside of year reporting. So the same year reporting, domestic violence same year rape complaints increased 105 crimes. So that was 491 versus 387. And then outside of that category, 72 crimes or 8%, 902 versus 830.
Yep.
That's.
Do you want to just repeat them?
My buddy back there.
Just repeat them. Go ahead.
So the DV same year rape complaints, domestic violence same year rape complaints, they increased 105 crimes, 491 versus 387. And then outside of that category of domestic violence, same year rape complaints increased 72 crimes, or 8.7%, 902 versus 830. This is same year numbers. And if you want, we can go over this afterwards. I'll give the numbers to press office, and they can give you something written out, which would be a lot, probably more efficient.
Yep. Okay.
I just wanted to confirm that the percentage of murders that were committed by parolees, did you say it was 19?
Probationers and parole, 19%.
Okay. And is that, I guess I'm wondering, is that a relatively normal figure, and does that suggest there need to be any changes as far as kind of oversight of?
Well, this is the second year in a row that it has risen, the percentage has risen.
This is part of our strategy for 2019 to work closely with the Department of Probation and New York State Corrections, who's responsible for parole, to make sure we get those numbers down. Yep.
So 2 questions. First of all, for the out-of-year rapes, do you know how many of them were, do you know what year they were coming from? Were they from last year? Were they from 5 years ago, 10 years ago? And my second question is about the transit numbers. I just kind of want to know what types of crimes that we're looking at. There was a 3.8% increase, I think. What specific types of crimes and what's being done to combat that increase? So,
yeah, just.
Good morning, Chief Delatorre, Chief of Transit. So transit crimes, that increase we had was driven by grand larcenies. If we look in Manhattan, overall transit crimes for the year were up about 95 crimes. We're still averaging roughly 1 crime per million riders a day. But if you look at Manhattan, we had an increase of 99 grand larcenies just in Manhattan alone. We did have a time during the year where we had some international teams, professional pickpocket teams coming in that were hitting our ridership. We caught a few of them, and they were being prosecuted. And then we have a group of our own homegrown, we call them Nifty 50, but the number's probably over 100 at this point. But to give you an example, these are people that are predators that just work the system constantly. Richard Rembrandt, arrested 8 times in 2018, 4 times in transit, all for grand larcenies. Another fellow we have, Rudell Faulkner, arrested 7 times in 2018, 5 times in transit, another grand larceny offender. We have numerous people. Santiago Gonzalez, arrested 5 times, all 5 times grand larcenies in transit in Manhattan. The good news about the names I'm giving you is we're working closely with the district attorneys, and all of these people are actually in custody right now. So when they're in custody is when we start to see the downward trend again in grand larceny crime. And we're working closely with the DAs now and and Mark J. on other strategies on how to handle these people going forward.
Can I ask what type of things are they stealing mostly? And then you said international professional pickpocket teams. Where were they coming from?
Well, we had 2 teams in particular. Well, we had
quite exotic, right?
Yeah. we had 2 teams in particular that come off the top of my head. One was from Colombia, and one was from, I believe it was Chile. And in fact, one of them was wanted in Kansas City because what they do is they come into the city, they work the transit systems, and they work topside as well. They pick as many pockets as they can over the course of a week or 2, and then they go to another city. So these people that we arrested actually had no criminal history in New York State.
And you arrested both of those?
Both teams, yeah, we picked up both teams. We have very, very good plainclothes officers working the transit system. They're just picking pockets. They're taking anything. We saw a lot of cell phones taken. We've been seeing a lot of the headphones, the Beats, the very expensive headphone sets. Some of those we've seen in a snatch. But for the most part, that when they're picking pockets, they're looking for wallets, credit cards, cash, cell phones. Cell phones were a big one.
Is that for just the pickpockets, or is that for grand larcenies in general?
That's grand larcenies in general. Yep.
Chief Delatorre, since you're up there, on Christmas Day, Commissioner Bratton raised a warning that the signs were present in the transit system. Basically, the seeds were germinating for a potential crime increase, the way that we saw in the 70s and 80s, how the crime started in the subway and then blossomed out into larger increases in the city. Is that something that you're concerned about, given that, especially given that transit crimes were down most of the year and then increased in the latter part of the year?
No, I'm not. In actuality, what we saw was a trend where some people who are recidivist offenders, had gotten out of jail, come back into the system, and once again started taking advantage of some of our riders. We caught many of them at this point, and we're now seeing the numbers stabilize and go back to normal, where we normally would be.
So, Ashley, as you know, I started out as a transit cop way back in 1983, so I'm particularly sensitive to any rise in crime in the transit system. And as you know, also, Commissioner Bratton was the chief of the transit police from 90 to 92, where crime was just out of control down in the subway system. It will not be returning to that level, and the slight increase that we're seeing this year, we know where it is, we know the geography of it, and we have a strategy to make sure it goes down. Dean?
You're here in the 6-7 precinct in Brooklyn. A number of precincts have had low crime rates this year. Can you go through the numbers or the reason, once again, for having this news conference here in the 6-7, what their numbers are? Because I'm going to go on the street and speak to the folks and see if they feel safe here.
You want all the numbers? I'll give them to you right here. Because Inspector Cologne would really like that.
Go for it. Go for it. No, make them have to listen.
Conversationally.
All right, so the murder number in the 6-7 year end in 2017 was 17. The end of this year in 2018 is 6.
Unbelievable. Where's Cologne? We got to give this guy a round of applause.
Where's Elliot?
Is he at his own press conference?
The rape number went up 4 from 39 to 43. Robberies are down 26.6% from 335 in 17 to 246 in 18. Felony assaults are down 1.8% from 612 in 17 to 601 in 18. Burglaries down 0.9% from 227 in 17 to 225 in 18. Grand larcenies down 10.8% from 657 in 17 to 586 in 18. And grand larceny auto is down 24.6%. That's from 130 in 17 to 98 in 18. So overall, they're down 10.5%, a raw number of 2017 and 17, and 1805 this year and 18.
So, Inspector Cologne, first of all, when people are saying nice things about you, you got to be there. This is, I just want to take a moment. Hearing those numbers, absolutely amazing, the progress that men and women of this command have made under your leadership. And the elected officials will affirm the fact that this is a precinct that not so far back in the future had a lot of challenge. Excuse me, not so far back in the past had a lot of challenges. But to hear that kind of progress just from 2017 to 2018 is unbelievable. So congratulations to you and all the men and women of this precinct.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
How did you get it done this year?
Trying to get this microphone to work.
There you
go. So I'm obviously going to be a little biased in saying that I have the privilege to work with the greatest cops in the city of New York, and working in the best community in the city of New York. Listen, when you pair those two together, you're going to get success. You know, our NCO, our neighborhood coordinating officers here in the 6-7, they work hand in hand with the community. They hear their problems, they address them immediately, they come to me, we figure out ways to address the situations that might arise from the community members. My field investigation officers, they do thorough investigations on that small percentage of people that are causing all the crimes. And that is the big reason why we have the success we do with the firearms that we're taking off the streets here in East Flatbush. That led us to #1 in the city. My community affairs, we established a relationship with our nightlife to prevent any type of violence in the nightlife community. We do that on a weekly basis. If they have events, they reach out to us. We work out plans how we're gonna pan out that night with the establishments, and it's just been the formula works, and we're gonna continue to 2019. We're gonna have a better year.
Amen.
I'd want to add one thing to that. We're also in the 6-7 because, as everybody remembers in this room, in June of 17, we had a police officer, now a detective, who was very seriously injured. And the 6-7 precinct continues to take care of Dalsh and his wife Esther and his daughter Dashi. They still, Dalsh he's recovering very slowly. It's a really serious injury, and with all this work that's being done here, the men and women of the 6-7 continue every day to look out for Dalsh and his family. So, amen. Elliot, thank you for that.
Amen. Who else?
The back row.
Yeah, following up on you mentioned recidivist offenders, pickpocketing, you mentioned a serious number of crimes committed by parolees. Wondering for the mayor, policy-wise, I mean, there's going to be a big push in Albany for parole reform, for bail reform this year. You know, is the NYPD talking to you about these crime issues? Is that a big concern as these changes might come to the state?
I think there's a couple different things. I'll start, and I'm sure the commissioner has thoughts on this too. The things that we want to achieve in Albany are things like bail reform and speedy trial reform, to ensure that particularly folks who have the lowest level offenses, nonviolent offenses, don't end up in our correction system if they don't need to, which is bad for everyone involved. So those are the things that would revolutionize our correction system, allow us to greatly reduce our population, save a huge amount of money for the taxpayers, while still keeping the city safe. And this is true for the whole state. The whole state needs bail reform and speedy trial reform. By the same time, we have real concerns about the parole system. And while we can say there's things where we want to see reform, we can also say there's things where we want to see some tightening up. Again, the Commissioner and others can speak to some of the things we want to see handled better by the state on parole, and we obviously are going to be talking to our own probation department to make improvements as well. Another point I'd like to make is, while we're doing bail reform, to ensure that nonviolent, low-level offenders are not ending up in a jail cell who don't need to, we should do another reform, which is to give judges the right to consider the dangerousness of an individual brought before them in determining whether to grant bail or not. Because we've had situations where it's quite clear that if the only question you can think about is flight risk, it leaves out a very, very crucial consideration, is what does it mean for the people of the neighborhood this individual comes from, whether they pose a threat to their neighbors. That issue has to be addressed in Albany as well. Judges need to be empowered with the ability to make decisions based on the dangerousness of the suspect as well.
So just to add to that, this is how we've gone from 2,245 homicides down to 289 this year, just by using these strategies. Anytime we see where there is an issue, we address it immediately. So we're looking at parole violators, we're looking at probation, what's the level of supervision, and this is all at the same time working with both of these agencies to make sure we can do this as effectively and fairly as possible. Solon.
Quick follow-up on the question. The 40% clearance rate for rapes, does that include exceptions?
Exceptional clearances, defer to Chief Shea on that. Does that include ECs or no?
The 40% is when we take a complaint report for a rape and we have an arrest on no exceptions. Correct.
And then just for the mayor and the commissioner, Mayor, in your opening remarks, you mentioned a new marijuana policy. There's also thinking fair evasion, changes regarding recidivists and handing out summons as opposed to arrest. Is this department now, with crime at the level that it's at, is it moving away from broken windows policing?
Not in the least. Not in the least. I've been very comfortable from the beginning of this administration embracing quality of life policing. I think the phrase broken windows is very loaded. It's one of those things that different people see different things in it. And there's some elements of the historical dialogue on broken windows that I don't agree with at all. But quality of life policing, I agree with 100%. And that I define as, remembering to sweat the small stuff, remembering to focus on the small things, because if you don't deal with them, it can lead to greater crime and disorder, but also because communities want those things addressed. Here's the reality in New York City for decades. A lot of communities were over-policed in terms of being treated, individuals being treated in a kind of difficult way in their relationship between police and community, but under-policed in terms of a lot of the quality of life issues that they wanted to see addressed. So this was the way it used to be. We want to do this, where we want to get the policing levels to be right for the needs of the community, respectful to the members of the community, but also take the quality of life concerns very seriously. When I was, younger in this city, and talk to people in neighborhoods all over the city. It used to be, you got your car stolen back in the day. You barely would bother to report it because a lot of times the precincts would say, well, we can't get to that because we've got much more serious things we have to deal with, right? People want to know if there's a burglary, the car is stolen, or something's taken from them, that it's going to be acted on. They want to know that there's going to be follow-through, and they want it to be respectful, and they want it to be consistent. So that, to me, is quality of life policing. I believe in it 100%.
So, yeah, let me just add to that. So, as you know, many people sitting up here were precinct commanders for a long time. And if we didn't address quality of life complaints, you weren't a precinct commander for very long. Every meeting that I've ever gone to, people are not really talking about homicides and shootings. They're talking about quality of life. And just to give you our numbers, since we changed our policy in the beginning of September, our marijuana arrests are down to 81.2%. That's 7,189 versus 1,349. So we're making sure that when we're out there, the people who are getting arrested are the people involved in violence and crime. And that's how you get closer to the community, and that's how you build trust. Yep.
There were some particularly heinous gang murders last year. I'm thinking of Junior Guzman in the Bronx. What gang enforcement have you been doing, and are you continuing coordination with federal authorities, which seem to have a strong impact on bringing down these gangs?
And again, this is how we got from 2,245 homicides to where we are now. Terry or Dermot, if you want to speak about that.
So as has been said, the precision policing piece of what we've been doing the last 4 years continues to drive how we deploy our investigations, cases on an ongoing basis. The case that you mentioned dealt with the Trinitarios up in the Bronx. At any one point in time in New York City, there is a number of cases going on, long-term cases, short-term cases, to address whoever is driving crime and violence throughout New York City. That continues to be a focal point in how we police New York. And it's at the core, really, of what we've been doing for the last 4 to 5 years with precision policing.
And these cases are done in conjunction with the prosecutors, whether they're local prosecutors, the SN, Special Narcotics Prosecutor, or the Eastern or the Southern District. So it's done in conjunction with them. We don't do an investigation and then end up bringing it to the prosecutor. We work with them from the beginning. Yes?
Well, related to that, I wanted to ask why you thought the Bronx was bucking the citywide trend in crime reduction. I know you gave some grim statistics about gang violence and domestic violence murders.
I think if you look at the murders specifically in the Bronx, I think if in July and August, those were very challenging for us. But towards the end of the year, we focused on the gangs and crews, and we were able to get those numbers down.